Everyone remembers the story the same way. A little girl in a red hood, a dark forest, and a terrible wolf. The wolf tricks the girl. The wolf eats the grandmother. And in the end, the wolf dies. It is a simple story. A story about danger. A story about obedience. Parents tell it to children, so they will never wander too far from the path, but simple stories often hide complicated truths. Because when you look closely at the story of Little Red Riding Hood, something begins to feel strange. Very strange. The wolf is always described as the villain, a monster hiding in the forest, a predator waiting for the innocent. But the forest was never the girl's home. It was the wolf's. The wolf did not enter the village. The village entered the forest. And that changes everything. In ancient folklore, forests were more than just wild places. They were borders. Borders between civilization and the unknown. Inside the village there were rules, law, order. But inside the forest, there were older laws. The laws of nature. Hunger, survival, balance. The wolf lived by those laws. Nothing more, nothing less. Humans, however, rarely enter forests without a reason. Hunters search for animals. Woodcutters search for timber. Kings search for land. Civilization expands. And every expansion begins with a story. A story explaining why the wilderness is dangerous. Why the creatures living there must be feared. Why the wolf must become the villain. Because villains make conquest easier. Think about the girl in the red hood. Everyone remembers her as innocent, kind, naive. But the story never explains something important. Why was she walking alone through the forest? Why did she speak to a wolf, as if it were simply another traveler? And most importantly, why did the wolf speak at all? Animals in fairy tales do not speak, because they are animals. They speak because they represent something. In many old myths, the wolf represents the wild. Nature itself. Powerful, unpredictable, dangerous only when threatened. But humans rarely see nature that way. To control something, you must first make people fear it. And fear needs a villain. So the wolf became the villain. But look carefully at the story. The wolf does not chase the girl. The girl approaches the wolf. She speaks first. The wolf simply asks questions. Where are you going? Who are you visiting? Which path will you take? Questions, not attacks. Yet those questions change everything. Because the wolf learns where the grandmother lives. And suddenly the story turns darker. But not in the way most people expect. The wolf reaches the grandmother's house. And somehow, he enters. That moment is usually rushed in the story. Because it creates an uncomfortable possibility. The grandmother opened the door. She let the wolf inside. Which means the wolf did not break in. He was invited. Fairy tales rarely mention invitations, because invitations mean choice, and choices make stories more complicated. Eventually, the girl arrives. She sees the wolf disguised as her grandmother, and she begins asking questions. What big ears you have. What big eyes you have. What big teeth you have. These lines are famous, but think about what they reveal. The girl knows something is wrong. She sees the danger, yet she stays. She keeps talking. She steps closer. Closer. Until the moment becomes inevitable. The wolf attacks. In many versions, a hunter suddenly appears. He kills the wolf, rescues the girl, restores order. The ending feels satisfying. The villain is gone. The forest becomes safe again. But stories often hide their meaning in the role of the hero. The hunter represents control, human authority over nature. Once the wolf is dead, the forest no longer seems frightening. And that is the point. The wolf was never just an animal. He was a symbol of the unknown, the wild, the world beyond human rules. And stories have a way of turning symbols into enemies. Because enemies are easier to defeat, but the forest never changed. The trees remained, the shadows remained, the silence remained. Nature does not disappear simply because a story declares victory. Which raises a final question. If the wolf was never the villain, then who was? Perhaps the girl who ignored every warning. Perhaps the villagers who pushed deeper into the forest. Or perhaps the storyteller, the one who decided the wolf must become the monster. Every fairy tale needs a villain. And sometimes, a villain is simply the one who never had a voice. In the silence of the forest, the wolf was always telling the truth.